Hi everybody, my name is Marlo De La Mora and I am the founder and owner of Chronically Wired, and I'd like to share my story with you a little bit. I was diagnosed with lupus in 2000. I was bedridden for 3 months and I was in excruciating pain and couldn't move. I couldn't even move my hands to comb my daughter's hair or wipe myself to go to the bathroom. I couldn't even walk from my bed to the bathroom. I had to use like the hamper as a walker because I was just in excruciating pain all over my body. They didn't know what was going on. I went through all extensive testing and everything was negative. Finally, the doctor had said, okay, let's go back down your medical records and see, you know, what else there could be. When he came to lupus, I told him, you know what, I think my cousin had just got diagnosed with that. So as he reviewed my symptoms and reviewed lupus, he's like, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and diagnose you with lupus because 10% of women get test negative when they are positive. So when he diagnosed me with lupus and started me on the treatment, I started to get better and I went into remission for several years. During that remission period is when I started to test positive for lupus. So now I test positive. So he was right on the money with that, and I appreciate that he did find that, because I would have been stuck in that cycle where it takes years to get diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, because a lot of them are cousins and they overlap each other. So they spend the first couple years just observing you to see what do you have. So I was blessed that I was diagnosed within the first 6 months. So fast forward to 2009, I was taking full advantage of life because I felt like I missed out a lot when I was sick and bedridden. So I was working more than 40 hours a week. I was a single parent. I was training for a marathon and playing on 2 soccer teams. Well, I ended up catching pneumonia and getting really sick, and that started my spiral down again with lupus and all the drugs the doctors are giving me. Every drug the doctor would give me, I get the serious or worse side effect from and end up worse. So I started to go into depression because I really didn't want to tell my family what I was going through at that time, because it hurt me the first time that I got sick in 2000 to see them all hurting for me. That hurt me more than the actual disease. I'm a giver. So to not be able to be the one on the other side and giving, it was hard for me to receive. I had to learn how to put my ego aside and accept that love and that healing vibe that I was getting from my family and friends. Well, in 2009, I didn't want to tell my family again that I was sick. So I kind of hid it. I mean, they knew I was out on disability, I was sick, but they didn't know to what extent. They would just get random calls from me every so often. Can you pick up my son because I'm in the hospital? And they would flip out. What do you mean you're in the hospital? You know, you need to call us before you get in the hospital. But I felt like a burden, and I didn't want to be that burden for my family. So I went through some depression because I felt like I couldn't lean on anyone. No one can understand what I was going through. I'm the first one in my family to really get sick like this. And my family is very active and we always push through things. We were raised by my dad where it's all 90% mental, 10% physical. If you tell yourself you're not in pain, you're not in pain. So being raised this way was hard for me to depend on anybody. So I tried to seek out a support group for lupus, and I found one that was near my house. And when I went, it was more like a clique. I didn't really connect with anybody. They kind of ostracized me. I was left out, you know, sitting by myself. No one talked to me, interacted with me. So the feeling that I came in with, I left feeling even worse. So I swore from that day on, I was going to start my own support group when I felt better, and no one was ever going to feel like I did. I didn't want anyone to feel depressed, because you're not alone. There's so many of us that are going through this. We just need to reach out and ask for help. So 6 years ago, I did just that. I started my own support group here in my hometown for autoimmune diseases, because as you know, if you have one autoimmune disease, you tend to have other overlapping ones. So I have probably like 4 or 5 autoimmune diseases. So I started my support group as an autoimmune support group. And within that support group, I met people who do not have family and friends like I do. I have an amazing support system. So when I started to meet people who didn't have that, it kind of bothered me. Like, if I didn't have my family, where would I be? I was with this lady till 3 in the morning at the ER, and then I took her home. The next day, or actually later on that day, I called to check on her to see how she was doing, and she was up baking. I was like, what are you doing? You should be in bed. We were just in the ER till early this morning. And she's like, well, Marlo, if I don't make $1,000, bake $1,000 a month, I'm gonna be homeless. So that tugged on my heartstrings, and I knew I had to take action. So what I did is I held a comedy show and raised enough money to pay 1 month's rent for her. And I wanted to hold a whole bunch of comedy shows throughout the year and have like a fund that if anybody needed help, I can help them. But because it's only me doing it and I'm sick myself, I could not hold. That one comedy show took a lot out of me. That was enough. I was done. So I kind of just let that fall to the wayside, and I figured, okay, you know, when something comes along and it's meant to be, it's gonna happen. So fast forward a couple months later, with all the drugs that they gave me, and I was getting all the serious side effects, a friend of mine had told me, Marlo, you just need to get off of all the drugs and use crystals. Now, I didn't know nothing about crystals. I was thinking, what? Crystal meth? Huh? And he was laughing. He's like, no, silly. Crystals have healing properties in them. You know, crystals like the jewelry, you can make jewelries out of them. So I started researching and Googling what crystals help with whatever element I was suffering from. And by doing that, I was able to get off all my medications. So between crystals, CBD, and essential oils, and diet, I was able to get off everything and start to manage my life free from all the Western medicine drugs that they want to keep pushing on you, instead of helping you learn the holistic ways to heal your own body. So I ended up making wire wrap crystal jewelry. A friend of mine, we had went and did a wire wrap class, and a friend of mine had told me, Marlo, this is what you can do in lieu of the comedy shows and raise money that way instead of busting my butt and killing myself doing all these comedy show events. So I ended up saying, you know what, that's a really good idea. So I started my company then, and it was called Chronically Wired because we're chronically ill, and people from our support group that I'm helping, we would have courses at my support group, and I'd teach them how to wire wrap. And that's the jewelry that we would sell at events.